Hi there, and welcome to Plant CEO. In today's episode, we have Chuck Muth, the Chief Growth Officer of Beyond Meat, on the show. Hi, Chuck. How are you doing?
I'm very good, Anat. Very nice to be here.
Great to have you on the show. And you're currently based in Florida.
Yes, I just recently relocated here to Florida, yes.
Okay, awesome. It'd be great to start with, like, if you had to review 2020 for Beyond Meat, how do you think the year has gone?
Not as expected. We had a lot of momentum heading into 2020, and particularly in our food service business. Our food service business was growing significantly faster than our retail business. And then COVID hit in March. So once that happened, a lot of our restaurant partners both either shut down or had reduced traffic, in many cases reduced their menu offerings and so forth to simplify things. So the overall food service business really it didn't perform as expected in 2020. I think that'd be an understatement. On the other hand, though, our retail business did incredibly well. So that was really unexpected. I mean, we expected both to do well, but the retail business exceeded any of our expectations, whereas food service, for all the reasons I just mentioned, just we didn't get it done there. So, so that's 2020.
Yeah, and obviously it's many companies have been hit in this way, and I think food service still hasn't recovered, even coming into the beginning of 2021 now. Still. Like, for example, here in London, we're still on lockdown and the restaurants aren't open. So I think it was an important part to invest more also on the retail side, and obviously to be patient when things get back to or seem to get back to normal.
Well, yeah, although we haven't stopped our innovation on the food service side, we continue to work with key partners there. It's not that we've completely shut it down. It's just that it's not where we expected it to be. Now, having said that, it has throughout the course of the year improved somewhat as restaurants have opened in different parts of the world. It's not back clearly even close to where it was or expected to be. And this is not, as you mentioned, the UK, this is not just a US or North American issue. It's really a global issue. It's affected virtually everywhere in the world. The only place, ironically, that it hasn't really affected has been some of the Asian countries, particularly China, where things are fairly normalized there at this point.
Yeah, because I think was it last year you entered China with also with Starbucks, right? I think.
Yeah. Interesting. Right around when COVID became a hit was really around April of 2020 when we launched into China in Starbucks, and then later in KFC and Pizza Hut. So it really disrupted our plans even there. I mean, I frankly expected to be there for the grand opening, and it was really we were excited about it. But again, we have moved forward with China, and we are expanding pretty quickly over there. And just recently announced or are about to open up our first production facility in China, which we're all very, very excited about. That will help us in terms of reducing costs and making our products more affordable in that marketplace.
Yeah, and it definitely help you reach the scale that you need for the market. So that's a great move. But you were saying that you didn't see much slowdown though, even with food service in China.
No. There are other challenges with China. It's a little bit, it's different than Western food. So you really have to rethink about the type of products you're offering there. So we're aware of that, and we're working toward bringing products that are more familiar to its Chinese consumer. But the market itself is open. I mean, stores are open, restaurants are open. They have regained their footing, I guess you would say, and things are more normalized, I think, over in China right now than most of the rest of the world.
Yeah. And you mentioned about innovation. There's been quite a few number of new product launches. I'm sure you must be really happy about like the Beyond Breakfast Sausage and the meatballs being created. How are they progressing in the market compared to the traditional burgers that you have?
Well, our traditional burgers our burger patties are still our core item, our most important product and most well received, and also our first jump into the refrigerated meat section in stores. But we're very happy with meatballs. We're very happy with the breakfast sausage links. We're very happy with our breakfast patties. I mean, they're all performing incredibly well and growing very quickly. We are still expanding distribution of some of those items, but we do have broad distribution across our entire portfolio. So it's just a matter of time before it gets out there. You may have read or seen that we just launched. We're just launching now in CVS. That's both for our meatballs and our burgers. Meatballs won't be in every location, but the burgers will be in most of the locations. So so we're very excited again, not only about the growth within the retail conventional grocery channel, but also other retailers like drug. You can see where this is going as far as a category. It's really becoming ubiquitous.
I mean, CVS would be a huge win. How many stores do they have now in the US?
I don't hold me. I think around 7,000, or quite a few.
Wow. Yeah, amazing. So as well as getting your pharmacy goods, you can pick up some convenience food at the same time.
Yeah, they actually have. They've always had a small grocery part of the store.
Right.
And our approach is very honestly, we want to be anywhere where people are buying, where consumers are buying food. We want to be there.
Yeah. And in terms of markets, so apart from China, which were the other key markets for you last year, and which markets are you planning to enter this year?
Well, Brazil was another key market we launched into last year. We're currently today in over 80 countries globally. I think it's more now about building vertically rather than horizontally. We want to make sure where we've launched around the world that we're building an infrastructure and a supply chain to support those markets, making sure that we have a marketing initiatives that we can communicate to the consumers locally. So we're right now more about building vertically than we are horizontally at this point. We are in, I would say, most of the major countries around the world, probably with the exception of India. And again, a lot of that's related to supply chain. So we want to, again, make sure what we're doing well. And then once we feel comfortable with that, we'll continue the expansion. We do think it's a global brand and it'll be available around the world.
Yeah. And do you see therefore India being a market for you to enter once the supply chains or maybe a localized factory like you've done in China would work better for you for that market?
India is unique. It has unique characteristics. It is a largely vegetarian community too. Yes. So it's not meat analogs are not something you're certainly, there are plenty of meat eaters there, but it's not something you're replacing like you would in many other markets. So again, I can't discuss any future plans around expansion in other countries other than to say that we are in over 80 countries and we are really right now focused on building out our presence and our availability and our consumer acceptance in all of those countries around the world. So so we have our hands full. But again, we do expect long term to be a global brand available throughout the world.
What if we took this cow off the table and just made friends with her? What if this guy grew more plants and we got protein from his beans, brown rice, and peas instead and made a great burger? What if burgers got healthier and the food we love had no cholesterol? What if we put it in our carts, on our menus, on our grills? What if your grandpa ate it and your whole team and his whole team? What if it didn't even stop there and we used less land and energy, put less greenhouse gases into the air? What if it was already happening? What if just taking the animal out of the meat made us and our planet healthier? What if we all go beyond?
So you spoke briefly about how you're customizing products to local markets. Can you explain on a little bit how you've done that, especially from products and also a taste preferences point of view?
Yeah, I think that's still a work in progress. I mean, we did launch recently pork in China and other Asian markets because pork is such a significant meat category. We of course, we recognize that different parts of the world have different food preferences. And if you're going to be a global company, you're going to have to build capabilities to, address those opportunities. So that's still a work in progress for us. I will say that we are both aware of it and are putting resources against doing that. We will have an R&D presence in Asia in particular. Europe, we may or may not be necessary, but definitely in the Asian market where the food is very, very different. We'll add R&D capabilities in those marketplaces so that we can better address the local food needs. But again, we have such an enormous growth opportunity with just our existing products today. It's important, and I do expect that we'll be there in the not too distant future. But right now, we have plenty of things to focus on with our existing line.
Yeah. And last year, you also launched this research that compared traditional meat burgers to Beyond Meat, especially with different health attributes. Can you talk a little bit more about that study?
Yeah, it was an unrestricted gift to Stanford University, so we had we had played no part in both designing or conducting the research itself, and so we had to live with the results, good or bad. Fortunately for us, it was good. It was called Swap Meat, and basically we looked at 80-20 beef versus our burgers, our beef, and it showed that we did it by switching to a diet with Beyond Meat or Beyond Burgers. It actually reduced cholesterol, actually had similar sodium and blood pressure results. You actually lost some weight, a little bit of weight. I think it was 2 pounds in total. So it was, we believe, a favorable study. It also had something else. I'm going to have to look it up because I can't remember it. TMAO, which is also related to heart disease, actually lowered the TMAO score, which is related to heart disease. We viewed that as a very positive result, and it validated to a large extent some of the things that we believe right along that switching to a plant-based diet is a good choice for you when you consider your health.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. I mean, also the reversal of those types of diseases, whether it's type 2 diabetes, heart disease, even there's been some research around cancer and Alzheimer's when switching to a whole food plant-based diet. And that's something that you pay a lot of attention to, especially in terms of the ingredients that you're putting into your products.
Yeah, that's right. We're all non-GMO ingredients. We're using plant inputs for all of our ingredients. So we're very conscious of what we're putting in our products. We are not taking shortcuts to try and get there. In fact, the 3 biggest priorities we have for our R&D center is, number one, to continue to improve the taste, sensory taste, color, transit color, the aroma, and so forth of animal meat, with a hope that's, with a mission someday or a goal someday of actually being able to replicate the exact, taste of an animal product. And then secondly is to improve nutritionals. We want to make sure that we're continuing to lower things like sodium content and fat, particularly saturated fat. We're already lower in both fat and saturated fat than animal meat, in fact, about 35% lower than 80-20 burgers, for instance, with no cholesterol, more iron, fiber, and so forth. But that's still a work in progress. We think we can get better. We will get better. And then third, and importantly as well, is lowering costs, because if we can lower costs, we think, at least in theory, that our products should be cheaper than animal meat. And over time, we believe we'll get there. If you consider the resources that are put into raising cattle or raising, pig and so forth like that, in theory, at least, we should be able to get there using plant inputs.
Yeah. And, raising of that cattle is so important to the whole equation. Obviously, a bigger picture around sustainability, but also I was talking to somebody yesterday and they were saying that 90% of, the cow goes for beef consumption. The remaining 10% is split between sort of leather goods and also the other byproducts around bones and blood and that sort of stuff. So but the way they said to also disrupt that market is also looking at the leather goods industry, because that is also powering a lot of the profits that are going to to the farmers, I guess. And obviously we need to make sure that the farmers are doing something else and still creating more sustainable and cruelty-free products and farming. But do you have an opinion on that side? Like, obviously there's, the cow can be used in multiple ways. One way is beef, and the other is all these other byproducts that get created.
Yeah, well, I mean, I want to address the sustainability conversation a bit, but first and foremost about the farmers, most of our products come from farms. I mean, pea protein is a core ingredient for us, and fava beans and so forth. They come from farms. So we actually believe the farmer will profit more by switching over to a more sustainable crop that, rather than, again, raising cattle, which is a very, very expensive proposition. So, we do believe that we are, I think, beneficial to the farmers out there and the farming community in total. And then as far as the environment, we did do another study on that at the University of Michigan in the US. Again, it was a peer-reviewed study that showed that our products we use 99% less water, 90% less greenhouse gases, 93% less land, and 46% less energy. So, we do have a sustainability aspect, to environmental aspect to our brand. You probably know, maybe your listeners know, but something like 25% of the world's fresh water is used for animal production, largely around beef, and 33% of the land mass today is used for some way for beef production. That's a very inefficient food crop, and it's going to be difficult. Now, we do expect analysts expect that animal meat consumption will continue to grow. In fact, it's expected to grow something like 70% over the next 10 years, largely because of growing population, but also because we have countries around the world that are becoming wealthier. Think about China, for instance, and with that wealth comes a status symbol. When you eat meat, it becomes more center plate item. That's not a good trend, because if you imagine the numbers I just provided, that if it's going to grow by 70 or 80% over the next 10 years, how difficult it's going to be, even with more efficient methods of raising cattle, to be able to support that industry at that level. So we do believe, because of that, we believe it's necessary, in fact, that the world needs to look at alternative ways to feed the planet. And plant-based meats and other foods we believe, going to be a big part of that. So we believe we're on an upward trend. We think that trend will continue to grow. We think if not only because of the things we talked about earlier about the quality of products and health benefits, but also because of the environmental impact, and land resource. It almost requires that we continue to grow.
Yeah, with those markets that are growing in their population, and they see meat as a status symbol, do you think that needs to be addressed from a marketing angle? And whether it's Beyond Meat or other organizations, maybe NGOs, trying to dispel that somehow?
We don't do negative. We try not to do any negative advertising. We're not that. We are an educational. We do a lot of educational marketing, and we'll continue to do that. We think the category in total is doing it for the most part. The government's going to play some roles as well. We know that many governments around the world, including China, by the way, are encouraging more plant-based consumption, both for health reasons, but also many of them are environmental. Europe, in particular, as you know, in Europe, has been very much at the forefront of getting that message out to consumers. Now, sometimes that comes in conflict with policy, because you have big lobbying efforts, and that maybe interrupt that a little bit and create some conflict and contradictions. But I think in general, most countries around the world are very much aware of the environmental impact and are beginning to encourage more plant-based consumption.
So from a messaging point of view, what do you think is really important now to encourage a faster adoption to Beyond Meat and other alternative products?
Well, I mean, keep politics out of it. I mean, just present the facts. I mean, there are lots of studies around, as you mentioned earlier, around the impact of eating meats, especially red meats, around things like diabetes and heart disease and cancers. And so, I mean, just getting that information out there. And by the way, it is getting out there, not only through the government, but there are many today in our digital world. There are many ways to get that message out there, and it's really resonating, particularly with young people. You think about some of the, what the health or fork over knives or, I mean, there are many, many, many documentaries out there, more coming, that are helping to educate the world. And the category is growing. It's growing very quickly. The question is, could we speed it up even further, and how do we do that? And I do believe education will be a big part of it.
Yeah. And can you tell me a little bit now about your background story? I know we've discussed it already, but it'd be great for the listeners to know a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So I actually, I worked for most of my career at the Coca-Cola company. And most recently, I was living in Maryland at the time, but I was actually the head of sales or commercial for in Coca-Cola, what they call their Venturing Emerging Brand, or VEB unit. And what that unit did was, a lot of CPG companies are buying up smaller, in most cases, healthier type products. So think about brands like Zico Coconut Water or Honest Tea. And once we acquired these companies, my job was to figure out how to blend them together in a way that really kept the energy alive for these smaller brands coming in. And have a consolidated selling and marketing organization. I retired from that job at the end of 2016, and one of the companies that we acquired was Honest Tea. Was the founder of that company is a fellow by the name of Seth Goldman, who I believe was also on your show.
Right.
And Seth lived in Maryland as well, and we stayed in touch. And not too long after I retired from Coke, he called me one day and asked me if I would have lunch with him at his house. And I went down and had lunch, and he made a Beyond Burger. And I was amazed at how good it was. I wasn't really expecting it. And he said, look, he goes, the founder of this company is named Ethan Brown. He'll be in Washington, D.C. meeting with some congressmen this Friday. Would you care to meet with him? And I said, sure. And so I went down to Washington, D.C., and Ethan and I walked around D.C. on a beautiful early spring day, sunny day, beautiful day, and talked about sports. And we talked about life, and we talked about philosophy. We didn't talk that much about business, honestly. But at the end of that hour walk, he handed me a piece of paper. It was a job offer, and he said, Chuck, he goes, I'd like you to move out to California and help me change the world and in the way the world views food. And that's almost exactly how it happened. And so I spoke to my wife, and we ultimately decided to sell our home in Maryland and relocate to California. So that was just about 4 years ago now. And at the time, I think in 2016, we were U.S. turnover about $16 million. So it was a very, very small company. My joke is that I could yell down the hall and touch virtually everyone in the company, because they all were in a small office. And it's obviously not the same company as it was 4 years ago. It was really good timing, because we were doing something that really hadn't been done before. And that's, instead of targeting a vegan vegetarian, we began to target flexitarians and meat reducers and provide foods that they were comfortable with. So it wasn't your typical bean burger or mushroom burger. It was something that began to actually replicate the sensory experience of eating animal meat. That's always been our objective. We even merchandise it particularly in North America, in the meat section. So we never, and which again hadn't really been done in any scale before. But now today, if you were going any supermarket in North America, in fact, in many parts of Europe, you'll see this enormous meat section. Okay, that's in the meat. That didn't exist just 3 or 4 years ago. So that was very disruptive in its own right. And that's how I got experience with it. That's how I was able to come over to the company. And honestly, it's been an amazing experience. And the reason I did it wasn't financial reasons. Certainly the money is great, and I'm a capitalist. But I had been retired, and it wasn't to come back for money. It was really because my wife and I looked at what Ethan was doing and how we felt it was really an important mission, and something that when you think about your career after work, after you've done, that you want to look back on it and think about the things you've been able to accomplish. And I felt this was something that would do that. And so we uprooted ourselves, which is my wife and I, moved to California. It's been great.
Yeah, and of course it's an incredible mission that you're on, and it needs to happen, and it obviously needs to happen faster, for sure. So yeah, it was a good move.
Yeah, well, and it was a really good move. And again, but at the time, you have to remember it was a $16 million company. It was a very, very small company. But it's been a great experience. Ethan is an amazing individual, amazing visionary leader, as is Seth, who you've met already. And so it was to be a part of this, play a small part in this, has been it's really been terrific.
Yeah. Can you talk about new product categories that you'd like to go into, and your growth plans as much as you can? Say, competition permitting, I guess, and not to give any sort of trade secrets away, but is there any sort of product categories you would like to enter?
Well, within the meat category, there obviously chicken, poultry is still a void for us. Things that you think about like bacon and things like that. So if you look broader than that and say that anything that is animal derived food is open game for us, and we'll look at it, I'm sure, at some point. And again, you're right. I can't share specifics right now for both competitive reasons, but also because we're public and it's not out there. But we do have high ambitions. We are at our core an innovative company, really a food innovation. We lean into our food. We're not just a tech company, but we're food innovation, and we put a lot of our resources against innovation. We have, I think, north of 150 food scientists, many PhDs on our staff. We just announced this past week we're opening up a 280,000 square foot R&D and business center in Los Angeles near El Segundo near LAX airport. So we're going to continue to invest in R&D development. It's a core part of what we are as a company. And I think you'll see a lot of things come out from that R&D center over the years.
Yeah, great. So if there's any food scientists also watching and want to be relocating to LA, that might be a good port of call.
Yeah, and again, like for the reasons that I said earlier, how I came out there, many people see it the same way. I just did an interview this morning before I came on your show here with a food scientist. He's a very experienced, very PhD, a very very experienced and knowledgeable food scientist. And he said, one of the reasons he's considering he wanted to come out was the mission, being part of something that is going to be special and makes a difference in the world, both environmentally, but human health as well. So, and not to mention, the 66 billion animals a year that are killed for food production.
Yeah. I've seen some interviews with Jim Cramer, and he's definitely now converted to be a Beyond Meat fan, whereas before he wasn't, right? And I think over the conversation, since he's tried those products, there's something to say about that, right? Where you have somebody who has a very strong belief or view on a product, but once they try it and they see the momentum of the products, they change their opinion very quickly.
Yeah, I think the way he sees it, first, it's category. The category has to be a robust, growing category to get anybody in the financial community excited about any brand in the category. So, the category itself is really a critical part of this conversation, and there will be lots of competitors there, and that's probably a good thing. Because you're not going to grow it on your own. You're going to need a robust, competitive environment. And we're certainly getting that, as virtually every major meat company and many others have come into the category. And I think he's bullish about the brand within the category because we are an early mover in this transformation to different types of plant-based foods. It's not that there weren't plant-based foods before. There were plenty of plant-based foods before, but they hadn't taken the approach that we're taking, not only from a product development, but also merchandising impact. So as a first in brand or one of the early brands, I should say, we have an advantage, and we have an advantage, and we have a credibility advantage with a lot of consumers, particularly young consumers. And it's going to be our challenge and our responsibility to continue to innovate in that space and continue to stay at the forefront of that innovation. And we will do that. And that's where we're committed to those investments. And if we're going to continue to thrive, we're going to have to do that. So yeah, so that's why I think he's bullish about the brand. It's also about the category.
Yeah, that's great. And finally, where do you feel that you'll be spending most of your time on? What sort of division area are you going to be focusing your growth strategies on?
Yeah, well, international is going to play a huge role. I mean, we're well established in North America. We're in almost every major retailer in both U.S. and Canada, and now well into Mexico. So it's going to be international. There is certainly a lot of opportunity internationally. You even look at Europe alone. Europe is a much more populous area than the U.S. and are very highly educated, knowledgeable around this category. So I would expect to see Europe to be in places like China and Asia and Brazil and India. I mean, ultimately all the world. I mean, there's just such an enormous opportunity for expansion, both horizontally and vertically. And so we will. I see my time being shared. I mean, we have a wonderful team behind me. It's certainly not just me, but my attention is clearly looking outward into international markets.
Great. Well, I wish you the best of luck for that growth in international and continued growth in the US. And thank you so much for coming on the show. And I hope to see you again soon.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate being on today. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Bye for now.
Bye.